Hey everyone, and welcome back to Building the Bireme. Today we are just going to jump right on into it with some more planking. You should get used to it because the next several episodes are probably going to be planking too. So here we go. So as you can see here, I'm still having some issues with the super glue. I'm not really sure why, but sometimes it just doesn't stick. So yeah, if anybody knows what that's all about, let me know in the comments. But here, basically what I'm doing is I'm just trying to glue down the planks on the top here. This little section is going to be completely covered, and the edges, or the side that's actually facing up when I turn the ship on its side, are going to have little holes in them where the oars are going to stick out. Now it's at this point that I notice that there's a gap between those planks and the ribs, I guess that's what you'd call them, of the frame there. So I'm putting in little spacers underneath the planks, between the ribs and the planks, to try to keep that section, flat and sort of, secure. So we talked about the Persian Empire in the last couple of episodes, and the stage is set for their invasion of Greece and their eventual ass-whooping of the Greek people. Or so they thought. But what exactly were the Greeks doing up until this point? And to understand that, you need to understand how the Greeks were politically organized. Or rather, weren't. So as you can see, more spacers because the ribs are kind of weirdly done. But as I flip the ship around, you might notice that some of that super glue is actually coming out between the seams of the planks. And I don't like that. The super glue is really thin and watery, and it's just sort of leaking out. And of course, I'm gluing my fingers to it all the time. But I think what I might end up doing is I might just end up going back to the regular wood glue because the thing looks gross. I'm going to try to sand it first and see if that goes away. And if that goes away with sanding, then I'll just keep doing the super glue. But I don't know, maybe I'm using too much. Maybe it's too watery. If you got any suggestions, or if you've ever built boats before and used super glue, let me know in the comments. City-states. That term has been thrown around quite a lot when discussing the political organization of ancient Greece. But what exactly does it mean? Definitions on city-states are usually very wordy and sometimes inadequate to describe the structure of a city-state to our more modern way of thinking. Myself, I prefer analogies. So here I am shaping the outer planks to accept the curve of the body, and of course the other planks that are going to join up with it. Now you might have seen me pull the instructions out a little earlier, and that was because I was just sort of referencing back because I was a little hung up on what was going on here. This is me testing out a technique with the rubber bands that'll come into play later. It came to mind and I wanted to test it out to see if it would work. And then I sort of abandoned it for right now, but I bring it back for later. You see, Greece wasn't a unified nation in the 5th century BC. Rather, it was a loose organization of culturally similar people ruled by the major city in their region. To better understand it, imagine the United States of America, but instead of an overarching federal government, each state was wholly independent and run by its capital city. For example, if you lived in the region of North America known as Arizona, the city that ran that region would be Phoenix. You would be an American culturally, but your citizenship would be Arizonan or Phoenician. Culturally, citizens of all the states would have a general shared culture enough to be called American. But for our example, there wouldn't be a single nation of the United States. And this is what Greece was like. Carved up into regions, with each region being administered by a capital city. Attica has Athens and Laconia has Sparta. So these black clamps with the little orange feet are great. Unfortunately, they are really, really strong. And so sometimes you'll see me put them on the boat and they immediately just sort of slide off. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but occasionally when I can use them in certain areas, like the one that's over there on the left, they work really, really well. Those feet actually move. They kind of tilt, and so whatever angle you're trying to clamp down, they will always have a flat surface on, the whole clamping surface. Something else you'll see me do is I'm using little pieces of planks to sort of put it against the hull of the ship to see where else on the flat surface of the plank, or the flat surface there, that I have to fill. Because I don't have to fill it all the way to the hull's edge, because some of it's going to be covered up by the width of the hull's planks that are going over it. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that's why I'm doing that. So here you have Greece in the 5th century BC, a bunch of independent groups that are all culturally similar enough to be called Greeks. They inhabit, of course, the mainland in the areas that we now know as Greece, but also the islands in the Aegean, and even some small plots of land along the eastern shore of the Aegean, which is important to why Persia is acting like a bunch of imperialist assholes. I'm trying out this new format on this video where it's going to be a little longer with longer pauses in between when I talk. Let me know if you like this style. If so, I'll continue doing it this way. Otherwise, I can always go back to the shorter videos. Some of the eastern islands in the Aegean and cities along that shore would often flip-flop between Greek and Persian rule. For a time, the Persians were ruling the region known as Ionia, until a few Greeks decided to revolt. This kicked off the aptly named Ionian Revolt, which generally seemed to upset Persia. Persia then used that as an excuse to not only take back the Ionian region, but to try and then also expand across the Aegean and into mainland Greece. I know I said I wasn't going to get into the Ionian Revolt in the first episode, and I'm really not. I'm just giving you a quick and dirty rundown. So now I'm adding, of course, more of those little spacers because the planking is a little springy. Because again, the ribs aren't exactly where they should be, or they're a little too thin, or whatever. So yeah, this just solidifies the planking so it's not so, well, like I said, springy, bouncy. And my apologies about the lighting. It was a cloudy day and the clouds are just coming and going, and I had an open window for my light because I like doing it that way. So yeah, it might get a little dim and brighten back up a couple times. Forgive me for that. Now you gotta understand, the Greeks were just as quick to beat up on each other than they were to beat up on the Persians. However, if you've ever had siblings, you know the drill. You can pick on your siblings all you want, but Lord help the person from outside of your family who decides to pick on your brother or sister. And that's kind of what goes on in Greece for, well, hundreds of years. The Greeks beat up on each other, but when there's an external threat, they seem to come together just fine. So this was the first inkling of the overall shape of the ship. And I gotta tell you, once these planks were glued in and secured, it was pretty exciting, actually. I could start to see the ship shape. The ship shape? Yeah. Start to reveal itself, and yeah, it was really cool. The downside is that the super glue is still seeping out of the seams, and it kind of glued the rubber bands to it. Their sibling nature that the Greeks have culminated in the Battle of Marathon I mentioned earlier in the series. Unfortunately, there was one exception: Sparta. You see, Sparta didn't come to Marathon to help because they had a religious festival going on. And if there's one thing you do not upset the gods by not having your religious festival. So there's still a little bit of bad blood between a couple of the players leading up to the Battle of Salamis and the other well-known battle at the same time, Thermopylae. So now it's just the little details like continuing the planking on the inside, the lighter stuff, all the way out to the edge of the darker planking, like you can see there by the tail. Otherwise, this portion of the ship in this video is getting pretty close to done. And there you have it. Those are the final steps to this portion of this build. It's coming together really, really nicely, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.